Are Sus2 chords just fake Sus4 chords, redundant and unnecessary in their hyper-specific nomenclature? That's what Mr. 90 Chords would tell you, as I call him, Mr. 90 Chords. I do not share that view, but I came across a music theory author who is presenting this perspective. Mr. 90 Chords says that there's way too many chords that are redundant and unnecessary, and that if you think about it, there's only actually 90 chords. And we're going to debunk that here today. Part 1 will present Mr. 90 Chords' stance on the redundancy of Sus2 versus Sus4 chords. In Part 2 of this video, we're going to look at a case study to expose the impracticality of Mr. 90 Chords' philosophy. And finally, in Part 3 of this video, I will be delivering Mr. 90 Chords his sentencing, which will specify what he needs to do in order to atone for this situation. So if you ask Mr. 90 Chords about these options for suspended chords, he is first going to show you a C chord, and now let's make it a C sus2, like this. Okay, now you compare that to what we know as a sus4 chord. Here's C sus4. Right, we're taking what would have been that 3 and making it into a 4. Okay, so Mr. 90 Chords will be quick to point out to you, hey, if you look at that sus2 chord, what happens if we take the 3 notes of this triad, C, D, and G, and we invert them? Well, if we go to first inversion, it's going to look like this. And then if we go to second inversion, it's going to look like this. Okay, so now we've got that C sus2 chord in second inversion. And if you think about it, or if you don't think about it, what we're looking at here is a sus4 chord. If you think about it as having the root of G, right? Literally, these notes that you see here, which we've created as a C sus2 chord in second inversion, are the exact same notes in the exact same order as a G sus4. So Mr. 90 Chords will tell you, well, there's not even a reason to have any sus4 chords then, since a sus4 chord is really just a sus2 chord in second inversion. He asserts that he is looking through all the signal and the noise and honing in on what chords actually exist versus how many chords out there are just unnecessary, endless, inflated list of vocabulary terms and all these fancy chord names. He doesn't see the point of a sus4 because he says, why wouldn't you just do a sus2 in second inversion? And he says, if you eliminate some of these redundant chords that already exist in different inversions of these chords, that you are only left with 90. So let's jump right into part 2 of this video. We're going to look at one case study, which, by the way, Mr. 90 Chords provided 0 case studies of how this is practically applied in practice. So let's look at Azure Lake from Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which is very similar, as you're going to see, to the song Black and White by Michael Jackson. So if you look at the basic lead sheet chord symbols for Azure Lake and Sonic 3, well, really all you're getting here is variations of a C major triad. So it actually starts with the sus4, and then it goes to the regular C major triad, and then C sus2, and finally back to C. And you're going to see a similar path of harmony in the Michael Jackson song Black and White. Right, it is very similar. The value of keeping both sus2 modifiers and sus4 modifiers in your chord repertoire is for crystal clear clarity. You look at these set of chords and you know, okay, cool, we're just pretty much parking on the C major triad for now, but we're going to move up to the 4. And then now the 2. We're keeping all the activity on this C major triad, we're just modifying it, but we're keeping the core structure intact. So the issue here is that if you are accepting Mr. 90 Chords' advisement on this topic, well, now this is going to change. Now we have to technically cite a totally different triad, because if you're in Mr. 90 Chords' classroom, sus4s are not allowed. And so we are awkwardly going to have to start this out, not with a C sus4 that's going to logically resolve to a regular C and then down and then up. No, we now have to take the additional step of not just intuitively regarding this to be a C sus4, but no, in order to accomplish these very specific notes, we have to now reverse engineer and figure out, well, what chord in a sus2 second inversion would give us the notes that we need? It's so confusing and annoying. I'm trying to think of it now what it would be. I shouldn't have to take this extra step. It's like I have to do a Sudoku prerequisite homework just to make music and write it on the page. Let's see, is it maybe built on G? Let's try that. We have a G sus2, we invert that, and then invert it one more time. Okay, that's D, so we were a little bit too high. So let's instead build that on F, I guess. We are not allowed in Mr. 90 Chords classroom to call this a C sus4. No, this is an F sus2 in second inversion. And so now what Mr. 90 Chords is requiring us to do is to introduce clutter into our lead sheet symbols. Because the way you notate this chord is an F, and then a sus2, and then these very awkward, unfortunate symbols for second inversion, which I'll tell you right now, I don't use these because they're horrendous. I have my own proprietary system for notating inversion symbols. You can watch my Sonic Unleashed video if you want more info on that. But it's interesting that this TikToketeer is peddling his streamlined, simplified, much easier and logical version of things, and yet he won't show you any examples of that in practice, where in your attempt to quote-unquote reduce the total number of chords, now you're going to have to bend over backwards to reverse engineer the Sudoku solution to say like, oh, if I want C sus4, how am I going to now reverse create that through inversion? Do you want to know why that's a violation of streamlined common sense? Is because if you're giving this to a performer to perform, you just want them to see what it truly is. It's just an evolving C major triad. And so Mr. 90 Chords is a penny wise but pound foolish. In his short-range vision attempt to make things simpler, he's just going to have it create a lot more work for himself and any disciples who play along with his method, but he's not going to provide you with an example of that in his video because he wants you to buy his book. He plugs his book, and he says that his book is celebrated and commended by Grammy-level songwriters and performers. I'm starting to smell a little fish here. It seems like you're just plugging for a sale. And so finally, I would say that Mr. 90 Chords' approach to this is also rather arbitrary. Why is a sus2 chord kept in the roster, but it's the sus4 that gets the boot? Isn't that sort of arbitrary? And isn't a sus4 way more popular and common? A sus4 is just like, yeah, you're jamming on the tonic, you just give it a quick little flavor on the sus4. And you also very commonly put a sus4 on the 5 chord when you're doing a traditional 5-to-1, right? That 5 chord with the sus4. We really ought to keep sus4. We should keep them both in because although it does technically result in a larger number of chords, the long list of chords is irrelevant because as long as you know what sus2 means and sus4 means, you can apply that to literally any chord, sweetheart. You don't have to memorize, oh, how do I make C sus4 and F sus4? Oh, now I got to do all this thinking. No, you just start with the basic triad, and then you move that third up to the fourth. That's much more simple. That will result in quicker clarity when you're reading chords on the page, when you're giving a chord progression to your buddy to jam along, or you're now going to go to a jam session, and you're going to expect all your pals to now learn an extra set of steps of how to reverse engineer a sus4 chord by doing prerequisite Sudoku. They're just going to say, if we're vibing on C, why don't we just all keep them as C triads? It's as intuitive and streamlined as medical terminology. You know how certain prefixes and suffixes mean a certain thing that can be applied to many situations? Like the suffix ectomy. What are some of them famous ectomies? Appendectomy. Tonsillectomy, rhinectomy. Sometimes part of the nose has got to go. You can take that ectomy and you can put it on hundreds of words. Mr. 90 fallaciously thinks, oh, that's too many things to learn. But it requires no extra learning. In fact, it instantly widens and broadens the number of words you know because now you only have to learn the suffix ectomy once. There's going to be dozens, hundreds of words that you'll be able to intuit the meaning because you see that ectomy. And it is that same streamlined intuition that when you look at a C sus4 chord, you instantly know what to do without any laborious calculations. So Occam's razor would like a word with Mr. 90 chords because the 90 chord figure that he is citing might as well be just a number spit out by an AI that he asked to look at all these chords and find how many are redundant. And if you think about it like this, you're going to find these examples all over the place. Because if we were to take a triad and then make it an augmented chord, like going from C to C augmented, Mr. 90 Chords would tell you, hey, augmented chords are not necessary. Instead of calling it C augmented, actually what you're doing is a first inversion A-flat major chord. And so if I'm playing a Mario tune, it's intuitive to put the chords as regular C and then C augmented. So it can clearly present that chromatic climb for that one note. And so because the root note is very much staying here, it is criminally inaccurate to try to bring in the identity of that A-flat note because it's not the root. Anyone playing a piece of music deserves to know what the root is without having to do a math problem on a piece of paper. And that, of course, brings us to part 3 of this video, where I will now be issuing Mr. 90 Chords his sentencing, which will specify what he needs to do in order to atone for this situation. Mr. 90 Chords, aka Alan Van Wert, I sentence you to very simply provide an example case study of how your system makes things easier. Because as far as I'm concerned, looking at that Azure Lake example, things actually get more complicated once you're required to play along with your nomenclature. Because you're limiting folks to such a small set of options, they are now going to have to exert themselves, bending and twisting the limited elements that they have in order to artificially reverse construct a Frankenstein's chord. It should be an instant red flag that he's asking you to invoke these other chord roots when they're very clearly not the root of the chord. And so, Mr. 90 Chords, as much as I really like your set, it looks like some kind of Star Trek spaceship and you got the spacesuit. I'm concerned that you're peddling us a little bit of snake oil, delivering a sweeping, oversimplified pitch just to get someone to buy your book today. And so in the interest of merchant customer transparency, I have weighed in today in order to call this egregious fallacy to the attention of my audience. And who knows, maybe you got it all worked out and you're going to school me with an example showing how great the system actually is in practice, but until then, we will all assume that you're giving yourself a huge rush of validation every time you say that there's only 90 chords, and that you have an exclusive view on how to do music theory right that's going to invalidate the ancient ways that it's been done. And believe me, I actually agree very much with your overall mission statement of trimming out a lot of these unintuitive, vestigial structures, even sometimes contradictorily applications of words. And so that's why I'm in your corner in that regard. But in this case, it is clear to many people watching along that you have cut off your nose to spite your face. You know, a rhinectomy. Leave your nose alone. Leave our noses alone. I support Sus4 chords because they're intuitive and so widely flexible and applicable to any number of different chords. And so as I say goodnight to everyone else watching this video, this has been Alex Yard here at 91.6 WAYZ, the Alex Yard Zone, terrestrial internet radio. Your follow-up assignment, having now watched this video, is just to play that Michael Jackson song, Black or White, at your piano and decide for yourself, does it make sense to spell out them all as the same rooted triad with intuitive Sus4, Sus2 modifiers, or will you get seduced into doing more work and calculation in an ostensible attempt to streamline things and remove clutter? See you out at Azure Lake, everybody. The view is sublime. Look at those mountains.